Okay, background good. Check. Socks.
Oh, you want to go straight to the socks, huh?
I want to go to the socks. We're
All
getting
right.
questions about it. They want to see your socks.
Oh my gosh. This
The pressure.
oh no, the pressure because I was telling my wife, I was like, I'm getting to a place where I'm literally just buying socks for the webinar. Not really, but
It's a good thing that you don't do every single week.
oh, I know.
Because that would be, you can reuse. Like it's okay.
No, I have reused, but the disappointment on Scott's face when I showed him which were some of my favorite socks are the bacon socks. And the disappointment on his face when he's like, "Oh, I've already seen those." So but we'll figure it
Add,
out.
add a little embroidery personally to them or something and jazz them up. So you can do
Okay,
something.
so these socks, I think I've had a similar theme on other socks before, but these are actually some of the more comfortable socks I've ever worn. My wife got me several of them, and like actually some of them are boring, like they're comfortable, but they're boring, and so I didn't bother showing them. But I thought these were fun, and I always hate this because they're only
You
on.
need to be very limbered. Oh, I love flamingos are one of my things. I
Are
love
they?
flamingos.
Okay, so
Yes.
there's two different color flamingos. There's like a
Yes, I see orange and pink. Well, that
yes.
reddish orange pink.
No,
And flamingos are really that color.
Oh, they really are?
Yeah, there's some that are more orangey red. Yeah, they're not all just pink.
Like
There's some that are more white.
a burnt orange, and then
I will find you pictures of real life flamingos because, like, yeah,
and
I'm not like totally nutso with them, but yeah, no, those are actually. I actually have flamingo socks too because my sister-in-law, sent me a pair of flamingo socks. So sometime I'll have to show you this.
I have another pair of flamingo socks, but these ones, they have an extra level of comfort, and then the other thing is, they're two different colors, but I didn't realize, but they're also some of them are standing on one leg, some of them aren't, and they alternate, so it's not like just a copied pattern. I was like,
No, they're actually, and they're pretty amazing birds too. So
are they actually? I don't know that I don't have a dislike for flamingos, but I don't have a love for them.
We won't spend the hour talking about flamingos, though I could. So we will talk about the topic that we're here to talk about. But unfortunately, you will now get an email with some brief snippets of information to help elevate your education in flamingos. So.
And I might end up loving flamingos more. So do you want me to just jump in?
I would love that. What are we talking about today?
So I'm always stirring around in my brain what would help most, and we've talked about it a ton, the idea of learning how to slow down and not be so reactive in our relationships, reactive in our responses. And one of the things that I taught this week, in the last couple of weeks, is if you ever give a response to your partner and or if you ever give a statement or you share something, you're vulnerable with your partner, and their response isn't what you expected. Okay, so think about you go to your partner and you say, "Hey, I was wondering if," and I'm just going to make something up. "I was wondering if you can make sure you're home on time today, because I'd love to go, grab a sandwich at this place with you." Okay, and their response is like, "Oh, you're always like this. Okay, yeah, sure, I'll do my best to be." And you're going, "What just happened?" Okay, so that moment that you are going, "What just happened? Why was their response this?" I would have expected a completely different response, because my response is, "Hey, I'm excited to," or what I'm saying is, "I'm excited to see you. I was hoping you could be home on time because this place closes," or whatever. And like, I also want to know what to expect and let you know that what my expectations are so we can go grab a bite together. And I want to introduce you to this place, right? There's excitement, there's fun or whatever that might be happening. And then they give some snarky response and you're like, "What in the world?" Well, that "what in the world" is a wonderful opportunity to say, "Hey, I really am confused. I had some excitement, some joy coming up, but obviously something happened for you. What happened for you? What did you hear me say? what did it feel like? Because I don't understand your response compared to what I was trying to send your way. Right. And that hopefully gives them an opportunity to say, well, it just sounded like you were criticizing me for not being home on time every day. And it's like, oh, well, so now here's another key part. Can I tune into that and say to them, oh, no wonder why you were upset. I'd be upset too if I heard what you heard me say. Now, hopefully we're able to then say, are you open to hearing what's actually happening for me? Are you open to hearing what's going on underneath? And that, again, if they do, then it gives you an opportunity to be vulnerable. And by slowing it down is where we learn why we have disconnection and how to actually connect properly. So I don't know that I have a ton more, but that the key piece, and this is where most of us struggle, is when you have that physical thing in your body that goes, like for me, it's like my head goes back. It's like, what just happened? Like, there's a physical response where sometimes when I'm really confused, I kind of look around. That happened to me the other day. I was in a group of people and somebody said something and I'm looking around. And when I did it, I'm like, it's like I'm looking around for validation of like, did I just hear what I just heard? Like, am I the only crazy one here? Did that literally just come out of this person's mouth? And we have physiological responses that if they happen, when they happen, I should say, and we tune into them, it allows us to slow down. So that head back, whoa, what just happened? Whoa, why did you just say that? Whoa, why did you respond the way you just responded? More often, we usually want to go and, well, I don't even want to go out and get a bite with you anyway. You're so grumpy all the time. And then we go into our wounds, and next thing you know, we're hurting each other. So, Tammy, what do you got for me?
Well, I have a couple of things. First of all, I think that response of the pulling away, like it's almost like creating that safety space. So it's like, and the looking around, like, is this? So to me, you're going, is not only did I hear what I heard, but it's like you're going, I need to create a little safe space for myself to figure this out.
Yeah, absolutely. Our bodies are amazing. Our physiological responses teach us oftentimes what we need. If I'm pulling my head back, it's because I am saying I need a little space. And if you think about it, I need space from the emotion I don't understand. That feels threatening to me. If I'm looking around and I'm like trying to look at the expressions on other people's faces, I'm trying to figure out, am I crazy? Like, is somebody else seeing or getting the same thing I'm getting? So we're looking for that validation. So our physical bodies teach us all the time, if we can tune into them, things that we actually need.
That's where I was going with the other part of my thought was, like, it isn't even just what Grumpykins said. It's like how they're, I mean, you could have a nonverbal response. So, like, if you do the, like it can be, so being able to,
or they sit and shake their head.
Anything, like if they're pulling away, if they're whatever, I think being able to say, I'm curious, you seem to be having, a response to this, can you tell me what's going on for you? So I think it's applicable whether it's a verbal or nonverbal, negative or possibly negative, where it's an unclear response.
Totally. Those nonverbals for us, I think, are pretty powerful. And I think a lot of times, because we've learned them at such a young age, we don't even recognize that we're recognizing it, right? Like we have micro responses to other people's micro responses. And so that's why when I teach people like how to do couples work, it's why it's so critical that we slow things down, because otherwise we miss what they heard. We miss what they're really trying to communicate. They miss what we're feeling and thinking. And it spins out so fast that's why we end up getting into these negative, ugly cycles of fighting with each other. So understanding how much nonverbal we are all tuning into is pretty important.
Well, and sending, because I tend to cross my arms, and it's because they kind of fit, like,
Oh, totally.
and but people perceive that I'm upset. Like, I've gotten called out on that. It's like, are you upset about something? And then I've also thought about, because you're also like, it's also a safety thing, because you're kind of pulling into
Oh,
yourself.
sure.
So I've been trying to pay attention. If I'm just doing this, is it just because they fit, or is there something more going on where I am kind of pulling into myself, because those nonverbal cues that I'm sending out, I want to make sure that they're like I'm saying, or no, I think I'm fine. Like, I'm not feeling anything, but if I'm sending a message out that is not really the message I'm intending and can be off-putting, I sure want to work on how can I convey a different, more truthful message.
Yeah, and that's a tough one, because I'll do the same thing. I'll fold my arms or whatever, and we have this judgment that, oh, you're being defensive. And that's where I think it's really important for us to ask each other, like, hey, when you fold your arms, what does that mean for you? Because for one person in one culture, and I've told this story, I think even recently on here, I remember being in South Africa, and I met somebody on the street, and it's really common when you meet somebody just to shake their hand and you keep holding their hand. And this guy pulled his hand away right away, and I was like, I immediately knew he did not want me in his space. And yet, if I were to shake somebody's hand on the street here and keep holding their hand, they'd be like, what in the world are you doing? Right? So these non-verbals, we all have them. We've learned them. Sometimes it's unique to our home that we grew up in. And so learning how to ask people instead of taking the judgment and applying the judgment, saying, hey, Tammy, are you upset in any way? It's like, no, I'm feeling really good. Oh, okay. Like, oh, well, that's just how she is. She just.
What? Yeah, and I appreciate it. I mean, it's been multiple people, which is why I'm kind of going, I better pay attention to this. But it was one of those where I was appreciative that multiple people felt at least comfortable to be able to enter that space of, if you're, not that I was sending off that stay away, I'm angry or something,
Right.
But,
Yeah, I always like it when people give me a heads up on a way that I might be impacting them. I always want to
yes.
know how I'm impacting somebody, not because I need to be defensive about it or anything else, because I care about people. And if I'm impacting them in a certain way, I'm willing to take a look and see if I can adjust that for them. Like, that's just being courteous.
Well, and being more connected to, in real and meaningful ways. So that
Oh,
is all
totally.
good. So we have a couple of questions. The first one is, I'm a betrayed partner, and learning how to set boundaries for my safety. I guess I skipped one. Sorry. Okay. So I started this one. So let me finish this one and we'll go back. I apologize. I'm a betrayed partner and learning how to set boundaries for safety and needs. When I do this, my partner often responds with, you're threatening me, or I'm too intense. This happened on a trip with kids that I shared, that if we get into a negative cycle, that I will need to disengage and do the rest of the day alone with the kids. We have been in individual recovery for the last year. We are just starting to do couple psycho ed and communication skills sessions in the last month.
Okay, so I think I'm looking for the question here. So when I start doing couples work, it's really interesting because I'd have to go pull it out, but the research kind of shows that the way we say our words doesn't like, if I train people to say their words differently, it doesn't tend to have an effect on the overall outcome of the relationship. What I try and teach people is that learning how to hear the words is more important. However, this is where it gets tough, because if somebody says to me, you're threatening me, or you're too intense, I have to learn to hear that what they're saying is, I feel threatened and your emotion or your behavior feels more intense than I'm comfortable with. And so I have to learn to not take it personal it would help if they learn to say, hey, I feel threatened, right? If somebody says, I feel threatened, then immediately my response is to say, oh, really? What feels threatening? Like, help me understand what's happening for you. If somebody says, you're threatening me, depending on the space I'm in, it's really easy to be like, no, I'm not. You're crazy. Like, I'm not threatening you. What am I doing to threaten you? And I've seen this so often where a spouse might say, even if they say, you create fear in me, or when I'm around you, I feel fear. The interpretation of the other person is, oh, you think I'm a big, mean, scary person? And it's like, no, I'm just telling you that in these moments, I feel fear. So when I'm listening to this comment, if you can learn to hear that, and I think this is your husband,
Yes.
or it's a spouse, it's the person struggling with the addiction. If you hear them say, you're threatening me, or you're too intense. You said I'm too intense, but I think you meant that they tell you that you're too intense.
Correct. Yeah, that's actually, we took it too.
Then you might say, you might use that to get curious and say, hey, I don't want you to feel threatened. Can you help me understand why you feel threatened? Now, sometimes somebody will say, you're threatening me, you're too intense. And you can even lean in and say, really, you feel threatened? Can you tell me more? I don't want you to feel that way. And they're like, well, I just don't want to do threatening conversations, so I'm over. I'm done with the conversation. And it's their way of essentially shutting down any conversation, which they're shutting down any conflict, because in their mind, connection is the absence of conflict. And that's just not true, right? That's not healthy. The repair of conflict is where connection really comes in. And so I'm not suggesting that learning to hear it differently is going to automatically allow your partner to have connection with you, but it does help to not pull you into the negative cycle if you can hear that they are saying they feel threatened and they're too intense. As far as the boundary goes, you had said that when you're on a trip, you've shared that if we get into a negative cycle, I need to disengage and do the rest of my day alone with the kids. So this is where it gets a little tough, right? Because you're saying my need is to separate and go do a day with the kids. And so it kind of puts them in a position of, okay, so I'm alone. And I get it. You're saying, well, I don't want to be in a negative cycle. The problem with the problem with boundaries are a need. It might be, look, I can take some of the kids, I can take all of the kids, or I can go by myself, because your partner has a right to have needs as well. Like, well, I'm fine being with the kids. If you need a break, go take a break. If you're trying to tell your partner, I need a break and a day alone as a way of trying to prevent them from getting into a negative cycle, that's not a boundary, that's controlling. That's not healthy. So it's fine if your need is to take a break, and it's fine if your partner says, hey, if you want to take the kids, go take the kids, take your break. But if you're using it to try and prevent negative cycles, that might be control and not be healthy for you or your partner.
Well, and it would be, I'd be curious, is there a way to say, for our vacation, for our kids, is there a way that we can do this differently? Are you willing to look at, having a conversation and navigating this together so that we have memories of all of us together? And,
Oh,
the
totally.
opposite of addiction is healthy attachment. So having those healthy connections, within a safe space. But yeah, I was like, every relationship I have has some degree of,
So
nobody does exactly what I need them to do, so.
right. And well, no, totally. And I would think that, okay, so, and I'm just trying to make this up. I don't know the person who asked the question, I don't know your particular needs, but like if let's say we're on vacation and my partner yells at me, right? And so this is a tough one too, because I've seen partners who are like, I'm going to do it this way. I'm not yelling. And it's like, okay, then what are you doing? Like, right? So we kind of have to say, look, if you raise your voice, like, then first thing we're going to do is that I'm going to say, hey, can we step over to the side? Can we leave the kids here and step over to the side? And can we have a conversation about the conflict? Because I don't like when the kids are in the middle of our conflict. Okay. And so, and then you might say the second offense, I'm going to say, hey, look, I'm going to take a break. I'm just trying to make up what could fit. Right. Then I'm going to take a break for about an hour, and I'll be back in an hour. And then we can talk again. Right. So, because what I'm doing is saying, look, I'm going to try to engage as much as possible. If we get into a conflict, I want to resolve with you, but you raising your voice at me doesn't work. Right. And so if you raise your voice, if you can be mindful of that, then great. Let's try and work through conflict. If you can't, this is likely what I'm going to need to do, because this is what I need to regulate. And so I'm not saying don't raise your voice. I'm saying if you raise your voice, this is the consequence, because I'm going to need to regulate. And it might turn out that there's such a dysregulating moment that the very first time they raise their voice, I'm out. I walk away, because that's what I need to regulate. And it's different than what I originally said my boundary was, because my need was different. So learning this nuance of boundaries, right? If you guys have heard me talk about it, boundaries are all about my needs. They're not about trying to teach the other person a lesson or controlling the behavior of the other person. So I can talk about what my boundaries are going to be, but that's like saying I can talk about what I'm going to be hungry for tomorrow, right? I might realize I didn't want tacos. I don't know why anybody wouldn't want tacos, but
I don't either, but yeah.
Right. But my needs might change. And so we have to understand that boundaries aren't just some thing that I randomly create logically. They're good to have.
Yeah. I had this other thought, and again, we don't know any of the circumstances, but I thought I could see an addict going, fine, I'll create conflict, because then I have the whole day to myself without having, because vacations can be stressful. They're wonderful too, but they can be very stressful.
Totally.
And so I was like having so now I haven't, I have a whole day, got into this scuffle, but hey, I have a whole day to do whatever it is that I want to do or not do. So
right. No,
anyway, okay.
And I don't think that's I think that's,
I would hope that's not the case, but unfortunately,
right. I think that's totally possible.
She does say, how do I respond? And I think you've done a great job with it. Okay. So the first question that I missed was, but Matt, how important is body language and facial expressions when communicating in a relationship?
Okay. The answer to this one is really simple. It's very important. Body language and facial expressions are very important to communication in everything. I try to be mindful of my body language and facial expressions as we're doing the webinar, because my body language and facial expressions communicate emotion. When I first started doing webinars, I would get comments like, hey, did you have too much caffeine today? I would get funny comments like that, because it's just kind of, it's my personality. It shows who I am. It shows the energy I have for the work. And like, this is genuinely how I am.
That's true. I've known him for years. That's genuinely how he is. So yeah,
it is true. This is not a persona, but here's the hard part. I can't control how somebody else is going to interpret my body language. I've had people tell me like, whoa, you're too much. And really I have to learn to hear that I'm too much for them for some reason. I'm not too much. I like who I am. And my kids will even tell me, okay, Dad, calm down, or okay, Dad, you're embarrassing me, time out. And I have to be mindful. And there are times where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to embarrass my kids. I'm being silly. I'm having fun, but I need to be respectful of their emotions and their feelings. And so the truth is that body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, all of those non-verbals, although tone of voice is kind of a verbal, all of those things are really important. What's most important, though, is for us to ask each other, hey, I'm curious. I noticed an expression on your face. Can you tell me what that means to you? Funny thing is, a lot of people don't even know. Hey, I noticed a shift in your body language. Or what's going on? What did that mean? So many people are clueless. And I'm not trying to be rude. They're just not body aware in the moment of what's happening for them. And there are times where I have friends of mine who will call me out and I'll be like, I don't know. I think I'm feeling this. So maybe I shared that. And I don't know. I don't always know what I'm thinking and feeling. In fact, I'm feeling a lot all the time. And I take right. So body language and facial expressions and all sorts of nonverbals, I think, are really important. But how do you and I get curious so that we can learn what they mean rather than making judgments and then reacting off of all of those? Those reactions that we have, those judgmental reactions, are usually where we all get in trouble. Learning how to slow down and get curious is really more important in the relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and I think there's you mentioned it earlier too. We're constantly taking in information that we're seeing and hearing, and all of the everything, and so we're picking up all of those subtle things that are we can have this perfectly whatever, but if there's just a little tweak in our voice or tone or something like that, somebody else can pick up on that. Even if we're trying to cover it, so to speak.
And sometimes somebody can say, well, you're too sensitive. And it's so interesting because some of us are really sensitive to body language, tone of voice. And the question I always have is, it's not that you're too sensitive. Why did you learn to be so sensitive? And what
good question.
Right? If you think about it, you learned it somewhere, and you learned it probably for survival. You learned it so that you didn't lose friendships or lose connection, or you needed to be hyper aware in your home growing up of what one or several people's emotions were, so that you knew how to behave so that you didn't get hurt or in trouble or yelled at. Or there are some people who I'm like, oh my gosh, you know how to read people and you're amazing at it. And you look at it and you find out, I grew up in an alcoholic home and my dad would beat me. And so I learned how to be a chameleon and to not exist, or how to perform in a certain way. But some of these skills we have, we're so good at it because we learned them to survive. You're not too sensitive. You're not undersensitive. You're not too expressive or too emotional. You're not under. It's why have we learned to be the way we are?
Yeah, and those are all important, important aspects. This person mentions, thank you, Matt. I appreciate you.
Yes.
Okay. So sometimes my partner can validate my initial response, but after that, I still feel unheard and unseen. It ends up in a spiral where he feels attacked and I keep talking to feel heard. How do we get past that sticking point?
That is such a good question too. So what I would do is I would try to slow down enough to say exactly what you said, which is, hey, I know that you just validated my initial response, and that is appreciated. I was going to say helpful, but it might not. But let's go there. Hey, I appreciate you validating my initial response. I don't know why, but I'm still struggling to feel heard and seen. And so you take ownership that you're struggling to feel heard, you're struggling to feel seen. But you also let them know that you recognize that they validated you. Then I would say just what you said. I'm worried or scared or concerned, whatever word fits for you, that if we keep going, you're going to feel attacked and I'm going to keep talking in order to feel heard. I don't like that pattern between you and I, because when that pattern happens, you feel lonely, I feel lonely, you feel attacked, I feel attacked, right? Whatever's happening there. And so how do we continue to connect where I feel heard and seen and you don't feel attacked, right? That's how I would approach your partner, because you're slowing it all way down and you're making the cycle, the negative pattern is what you're making the enemy. And I've told couples, tell them that, hey, I hate this cycle. I hate that this thing interferes with you and I having a good relationship. Something's going on there. You're trying to validate me. I'm feeling unheard. Man, I hate that stupid cycle. And so it's not, I hate my stupid partner. It's not, I hate my stupid self. It's the cycle that's the enemy. And that's not easy for people to see. I love that you're recognizing it.
Well, one of the things I thought about is, there's different forms of validation. And I'm wondering if the kind of validation you're getting is not effective. Like if I give lip service, man, I'm sorry, well, that's validating. I hear you. I validate you. I hear what you're saying. I'm sorry. That's very different than I hear what you're saying. And maybe there's some action steps, and let's implement some actions. Like I would almost take a look back at when you hear he's validating, but you're not feeling that it's heard. Is there what is the disconnect on that too?
Well, it's interesting because she's followed it up and she said, yeah, the validation is parroting versus really understanding. So first of all, there's a book I've recommended called I Hear You by Michael Sorensen. We've talked about it on here before. And then going beyond that book, because that book is really good at just teaching the basic skills of like learning how to listen to people. Beyond that book is another book called Nonviolent Communication by Michael Rosenberg. I love both of those books for different reasons. And so what you might want to do is approach your partner and say, hey, I realize that what I'm struggling with is that you are attempting to hear me, and I'm struggling to feel that it's maybe genuine. I'm struggling to feel that you're grasping what is happening for me. And so I was wondering if we could practice some other forms of you hearing me or validating me. And a lot of times early in recovery, I've had spouses tell me, betrayed partners tell me, that their partner feels like a robot. And it's hard because my response to a partner experiencing betrayal is, yep, that feels awful. And at the same time, it's like, and have you ever seen somebody try and ride a bike? They're terrible at it at first, right? Like especially if you teach an adult to ride a bike for the first time, they're awful and they're falling over and you're sitting there going, this is not that hard. It's crazy when you think something so simple isn't happening. And so, yeah, unfortunately, early on, they're robotic but it is their attempt at showing up. And so being compassionate and appreciative at their attempt, well, the more they practice it, the better they're going to get at it. Unless I guess there's always the possibility that they're truly checking the box and in the long run, they don't care. But most of the time, that's not what I'm seeing. I see somebody who really does care, who gets frustrated because they're already struggling with their own shame that they're never going to be good enough. And so they're trying these new skills that they're learning in recovery, and they're bad at it. And so you can do some work to actually guide them where you can say, hey, thank you. I'm wondering when I said, I've got to try and come up with something. When I said that this made me sad, can you try telling me, hey, I'm sorry you're sad. I don't like to see you hurt. Tell me how often this hurt comes up for you, right? And you might need to like teach them. I remember one time I showed the empathy video by Brene Brown, the one with the bear and the fox. If you go onto YouTube and you search Brene Brown empathy, it should be the first one comes up. It's probably got 20 million views or more. And it's like a short video. And at the very end, the bear, who's the one who's being empathetic, says, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. And my wife was like, oh, really? That's all I have to say? Because my wife, I'm the more emotional one, and she's the one that's more emotionally stable.
No, it's not stable. It's but yeah, I mean, like some of us have a broader range of emotions and tap into it a little easier than our spouses.
And I'm not saying it in a degrading way towards myself or her, right? It's just, in fact, had I married somebody as emotional as me, it probably.
Oh my God, yeah. No. Right? My husband is very like his span of emotions are this, mine are this, and that's better than it was, but they're still in his are like this. Oh, he's really happy, he's really sad,
And the truth is, my wife just didn't know how to, like, what to say. She could tell that like what she was saying wasn't adequate. And I remember when she learned that, and she was like, hey, I don't know what to say, but I'm just really glad you told me. And I'd be like, okay, that was scripted, right? But at the same time, it wasn't, because she meant it. She really was saying, I don't know what to say. And she really was saying, I'm glad you told me. And she also was saying, I wish I knew what to say, right? And over time, I've literally said, hey, would you mind saying this? Could you try saying that? And like, the truth is, she does the same thing with me. She'll say, hey, I need you to do this thing for me, and I'll do it. And she's like, hey, not exactly what I wanted. Would you try doing this? And there were times where I'm like, oh, I'm never going to be good enough, which was all my emotional stuff. And I had to be like, no, she's just trying to teach me what she needs, just like I try to teach her what to say. So there is a bit of that push and pull that has to happen in our relationships, and it's good.
But that's investing in the relationship and being, both of you wanting to do it, wanting to do it in a way that's meaningful to each other. And this person adds, yes, thank you. I hear you. Maybe his attempt from the basic area, and a robot is better than no validation. I 100% get your point. But I always, you mentioned riding a bike. I think of it as like learning another language. This is a whole different language. And if you, as an adult who've only had one language, try to learn another language, it's very difficult. And so, you are going to mispronounce words. You are going to put the wrong, the female version instead of the male version, or you're going to do something wrong,
Right.
But somebody in that country is going to go, I hear you, and I think you're asking for the restroom. It's over there, versus just going, so it's the attempt
rather than saying stupid American, you only speak one language. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. So.
And I actually think that's probably a way better analogy, is learning the language, because the language of communication, it is such a difficult language to learn how to communicate emotions. I think learning how to feel emotions is a whole nother language. Learning how to express emotions is a whole nother language. Like, you're talking about major changes. And when you have somebody who has used addiction, used poor habits their whole lives to try and cope with that, with the illiteracy of that language, trying to say, no, you're going to learn a new language, and having them be fluent in it, a terribly difficult process. I've seen people quit their whole their whole recovery because they just don't believe that learning that new language is possible, and they give up.
which is sad. And because
Oh
I
yeah.
do think we can now, are we ever going to be as good as a native speaker? I'm using this, same analogy, but no, we are not. So for people who never had the struggles that an addict, it's different. It is we can learn, but it's harder. It's harder to learn all of those things and be as naturally, gracious as people that have had it all their lives. But when you're talking about too, it's like if I've been doing this for years, decades, as a self-protection thing, and now you're asking me to step out, it's like, okay, it's really, really scary. And so getting some growth in it, having positive interactions, and go, oh, okay, I got some affirmation on that, maybe not the whole affirmation I wanted, but but at least my spouse is seeing that I'm trying, I am trying. Then it's like, okay, now I'm going to be a little braver next time, and I'm dip 2 toes in.
How many of you betrayed partners out there would love just to have like that clue or that sense that they're actually trying, right? And if you think about it, take it a little bit deeper, that they're actually trying because from their heart they want to change, right? And so when we can learn that, hey, yes, they're robotic, the scary the scary part for betrayed partners.
That was awesome.
The scary part for betrayed partners is, are you changing just to try and appease me, right? Or are you changing because you want to be with me? You want a better life. You want a better connection, right? And so that's where it can be very frustrating for somebody in the addiction, because for them, it feels like, man, no matter what I try, it's never enough. But they don't recognize that for the betrayed partner, that it's not that it's never enough. It's that the betrayed partner is scared to death that he or she isn't doing real change out of their heart because they desire a different life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. Well, I was thinking too with the for an addict, it's the scary thing is, if I don't do this perfectly, my partner may leave me. And so like there's all of this extra stuff.
And
It isn't just what I say or do. It's like this whole big thing
and
behind
it's too much. It's overwhelming.
Mhm.
I try to tell those that are struggling with the addiction, I always try and tell them, like, I hate to say this, you actually have to learn to be okay that you are imperfect. And they're kind of like, well, I'm okay with it. It's my partner who's not. And I'm saying, no, that's what I'm talking about. You need to be okay that your partner is going to be disappointed, that he or she's going to be hurt, and that actually you lean into that hurt and disappointment. Hey, I realize that because of my imperfection, that hurts you and that you're disappointed. And I hope that over time, as I get better at this, you feel safer and safer. But learning how to do that is so difficult because their self-worth, which isn't real self-worth, is based on whether my partner approves of me or not, right? So they base all their self-worth on whether their partner approves or not. And so they're doing things going, okay, tell me I'm doing better. Tell me I'm doing
Yeah.
good. And the betrayed partner is like, I want to tell you you're doing good, but if I tell you you're really doing good, you might stop trying to do good. And then the betrayed partner is like not giving the affirmation and validation because they're scared that the person with the addiction is going to be like, all right, cool, I'm up, I'm done, I've satisfied the requirements.
Oh, and I don't want to add to that fear, but I have people that go, like I've done all this work, so like and I'm like, yeah, you've done all the work, and it's a lifelong journey. So welcome, keep at it, keep
Right.
getting better. So this person adds, yes, an exclamation point. You nailed the betrayed partner perspective. That is me, and yes, that is my partner struggling with addiction fears too. Wow, you nailed it. You weren't even here. that's just because you're so good at this work. So
It's really funny because I get that a lot. They're like, people will say to me, "Do you have cameras in our home?"
yeah,
And,
exactly.
and in my head, I'm like, I don't work
Creepy.
for free.
Yeah,
Creepy,
yeah.
and I don't work for free. I'm not gonna just sit there and watch you. The thing is what I understand, what Tammy understands, we understand the behavior, right? We understand the heart and mind of each person, and this is just so common. And it's crazy because we feel so alone. But if we realized everybody's experiencing this, and there are some nuances that are a little different, and there are some circumstances that are
Mhm,
different, but
mhm.
we are all in this boat. We're all experiencing it. And the trouble is we have a hard time realizing the gracious assumption, the best intentions of our partner usually is really pure. But we're so scared that it's not. We're so scared that they want to catch us, or they're mad at us, or they want to, prove that we're out to get them or a bad person, that we stay stuck in that narrative. It's hard to change the relationship that way.
One of the phrases that another webinar host taught me, and I've actually used a lot, is the story I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
So in those moments, the story I'm telling myself is that if I validate you, then you're going to stop trying. I mean,
Yep.
like just speaking and communicating those fears, and the story I'm telling myself is that no matter what I do, it's not ever going to be good enough, and and you still may abandon me. I mean, like wow, to be able to step into that space and go, wow, we're both just scared. We're
Yeah.
scared, and
Bigger,
hurt.
bigger picture, because that's one phrase that works. Look at the bigger picture. What that
Mhm.
phrase is doing is it's me saying, I'm going to own my judgment. Okay. The story I'm telling myself, the judgment I have in my head and in my body is that you. Okay. And when I own my judgment, generally when somebody's owning their judgment to me, they're saying, I'm open for a different view, but I need to tell you my judgment so that we can figure out what's really happening here. So when somebody says to me, the story I'm telling myself, they're leaving me room to say, I can see why you're telling yourself that story. And that makes sense why you're having this response now. You make sense to me. So they leave room for me to be empathetic. And then in addition to that, they leave room for me to say, can I tell you the story I'm telling myself? Can I give you my perspective? And so if I own my judgment and you own your judgment, we can slowly work through that until we both understand each other. We may not even agree with each other, but if we understand each other, that's where connection happens.
The question we started off with, where the partner said, you're threatening me, or that you're doing tense. If that partner has said, the story I'm telling myself is is that I'm being threatened by the words you're saying, or that the intensity you're giving off is too intense for me. Well, that changes the perspective, because then I'm owning, this is what I'm saying. And then the other person has the ability to say, I'm sorry you're feeling threatened, but here's what I was trying to convey. I mean, whatever, but like, it's such a more neutral space to have a conversation, rather, because as soon as you go, you're
Right.
even if the words aren't exactly as intense as that, it's still, you are doing this to me.
Right.
I'm the only person that has control over my actions and reactions.
And it implies intent. That's where
Hmm.
we get so stuck, is when I feel like somebody's implying my intent, then I get defensive, because I'm like, well, how dare you? You don't know my
Yeah.
intent. You don't know my heart. Right.
Right.
And so I feel seen and unheard, or unseen and unheard. And it's interesting because as you were saying that, I had that thought. Every once in a while, if I have a trusting relationship with somebody, I can even say to them, they'll make a comment. You act like you're scared of me, and then I can say, so the story you tell yourself is that I'm afraid, and that I'm afraid of our relationship. And they're like, yes, exactly. Okay, well, that makes more sense if that's the story you're telling yourself. A lot of times it's me saying, okay, do I hear your judgment correctly? And it's like, yes, that's my judgment. Oh, okay, well, that makes sense why you're responding this way. And so I've even used that phrase to help somebody else own their judgment. and then open up our conversation in our whatever the relationship is.
Do they catch themselves hearing you say the story you're telling? I mean, like,
They do.
that'd be interesting.
Every once in a while, somebody will say, like the response that cracks me up is that people will say, well, that's not just a story.
That's what I was wondering. That's what I was waiting for, is like, that's not a story, that's true.
It's true. And then my response is, no, I'm hearing that from your perspective, that is true. Right. But then I'm doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say to them, no, I am hearing that from your perspective. That is your truth. I totally hear that. You're helping me understand that. And that, again, these are like black belt emotional kung fu that I'm doing here, but I do it all the time. I do it in therapy. I do it in relationships. My friends know it. I have friends that do it to me, because this is how we slow conversation down. And so saying to somebody, no, I hear that this feels very true for you. And I think I'm getting that. And it kind of leaves the door open of, it may not be true for me, but I do hear that it's true for you.
So going back to, again, to the example of the vacation. So if he's not able to say it as the story I'm telling myself, a partner could presumably say, you know, I is the story you're telling yourself that I'm, or I hear the story that you're telling yourself is that I'm threatening, et cetera, or that, yeah. So instead of looking for the addict to take ownership, but to take it to that more neutral space.
Totally. So in this example, assuming that it was a he says, you're threatening me. And then, yes, I could respond and say, oh, okay. So if I understand it, the story you're telling yourself is that I'm being threatening right now. And it's like, yes, you're totally being threatening right now. Okay, that makes more sense why you're having the response you're having. Right. And what I'm doing is just slowly bringing it down. And my hope is, and I don't know if this is true, that if I did that, he might be like, well, if you're not threatening me, then what are you doing? Right. Because if you see what I'm doing there, you're threatening me. Okay. So I hear that the story you're telling yourself is that I'm being threatening. Yeah. You're raising your voice, you're getting mad or whatever. Right. Okay. So I hear that. You feel like I'm being threatening, so that your response makes sense to me. Right. And then they're typically like feeling a little understood. And so their response is usually going to be something along the lines of, well, if you're not threatening me, then what are you doing? Okay. Are you open to having that conversation? Because I'd love to talk about that. Right. You're slowly de-escalating the other person so that we can engage.
I love that idea. So I mean, I use it myself, but I've never, flipped the dialogue.
And some of these things we do naturally, like we learned how to do. Like there's some of these skills that I was I don't know that I was totally a peacemaker, but definitely a conflict avoider as a kid. And so some of these skills, I mean, when I was a teenager, I got into doing sales and things, and man, I would kill it. And I'm still really good at sales, but a lot of it's because I learned how to de-escalate people and open a dialogue, because the home I grew up in was crap. Like, sorry, mom, you already know, but but like it was bad. And so these skills I learned as a kid, I often, now my problem is that earlier on, before I got into a lot of my own recovery, is I would sometimes lie to de-escalate somebody, because I'm like, oh crap, I may have made a mistake here. And I had to learn not to do that. I had to learn a lot of how to get rid of a lot of unhealthy things to de-escalate. But some of these skills are natural for people who had to learn to de-escalate other people in order to create safety as much as they could in their homes growing up. Some people are just naturally good at this. But I shouldn't say naturally. Some people had to learn early, and so it appears like they're naturally good at it. But I had to get a lot of my garbage out of the way, because these skills looked like an unhealthy manipulation, and sometimes they probably were for survival. But now I've learned to use them, getting rid of my unhealthy stuff like lying and whatever else, to actually now engage healthily with people without having to lie or whatever.
Yeah, but yes, to be able to turn it, because, well, here's the difference. Then it was survival. Now you want healthy connection in real and meaningful ways. So it's a very different goal in mind rather
Totally.
than just, surviving. Okay. Oh, so this person has, that's brilliant. Thank you. The challenge I have is to have to be the bigger person. And I feel like I'm doing most of the work first before the attic can hold space for me and my feelings. Going back to, there's no Rosetta Stone for learning to have the language of empathy and caring and all of those things. So yeah, unfortunately, you probably already have the skills, and so it does feel like you're still carrying the load. But
Well,
yeah,
it's a tough thing, because with the person who just responded, I don't disagree with you. I've always said that it feels like the greatest injustice when you have somebody in the relationship who has an addiction, and then there's this betrayal, and then it's almost like the partner with the betrayal has to hold on longer before the partner with the addiction ever can learn to show up. The misnomer, I think I'm using that correctly,
yes,
is that you are doing most of the work first. And it's like, no, I don't know that you are doing most of the work first.
okay,
You're doing, how do I say this? You're more mature first.
that's what I was going to.
And I'm not trying to be
skills.
rude. I'm not trying to be rude to the person struggling with the addiction. So it feels like you're doing most of the work, but they're doing like miserable work. I mean, they're digging into all of their crap, but it's hard because you as a betrayed partner are like, hey, when you clean up your childhood and handle all this addiction, maybe then you can show up for me. So it feels like in the relationship, you're doing most of the work. And in that sense, I guess you probably are. But like, if they're doing recovery, like they're doing miserable, awful work, so are you. But like, you're waiting for them to catch up. Like, you're at a maturity level, not trying to be demeaning to somebody with an addiction, but your maturity is like here, and like you're slowly waiting for them to catch up, if that makes any sense.
No, I do. I use the analogy, like they're in kindergarten with all of these, I mean, if you have completely numbed out and shut down emotions and, dealing with difficult things, then, you have to start somewhere,
Right.
But you're not going to be able to write your graduate thesis, the first week you stop the problematic behavior.
Totally. I'm sorry, that last one, but gosh, the betrayed partner. Wow, Matt,
Yeah.
you validate me so much. I'm glad that my expressions are validating to you, because, but no, that's what it's like. It's like,
Yeah.
it's so true.
Yeah. This is hard stuff, but so I'm up in Seattle again, and there's a great noon 12-step meeting that I found here. And so when I'm here, like I was there yesterday and there today, and it was a gift to go to 2 meetings in a row, and like I'm sitting there and I'm going like, I am so incredibly grateful, because there's people that have 5 days of recovery, and then yesterday somebody had 45 years of recovery.
Oh,
and the commonality is we're all there, working on stuff, and some of us, are a little farther on the scale, but the benefits of recovery, I mean, just gratitude all over the place. So for you betrayed partners, if you can navigate the space and find the support for you, if your addict is really doing the work, they can be different people, I promise.
Yep. And I'll throw in a quick plug here. I was recently working with one of my clients who attended Seeking Integrity in LA, Sila. And it was really neat, because just seeing anybody who's needing inpatient, just throw in a plug. Seeking Integrity LA, going to Sila was phenomenal for this and several other of my clients. And it's sometimes that is needed. You need an inpatient treatment to have some of the distance and get the wake up call you need. But slowly but surely, each of these clients just keeps plugging away, getting it done. And I hope their spouses feel the return on that, because it happens. Sadly, for you betrayed partners, it's slow, and I'm sorry, but for many that I've seen, it gets there. It does get better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear often, I love when I hear from the alumni, that it was life changing. I care more when I hear from partners and spouses, and I do, fortunately, with regularity, that they see, and they'll like was mentioned earlier, that it's awkward and it feels a little robotic and stuff, but they see that he's trying, and they have hope, and that's really meaning. We don't fix anybody in 14, 21, or 28 days, but our clinical staff is, bar none, to do that intense work is great. Email me or call me if you have questions. But Matt, it was a pleasure. Thank you. It was great to see you again. All right, take care. Thanks for the questions, everyone.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
thanks everyone. Bye.